I will call to order the Personnel Policy Curriculum Committee meeting, which is duly noticed on February 26, 2021, through posting and notification of the press in accordance with Wisconsin 1984. The safety message. Put my notes in my phone here. This is about bullying, and it's actually I think I saw that March was like a national bullying awareness month, and something I found said that 1 in 4 students are bullied, and 43% of students are bullied online. Which is it's so sad. And so I encourage you to reference the district student services page. I saw that there's the P3 Tips app. There's information on there, a video on there with Crime Stoppers, and people can download that for free and report any bullying there anonymously, or you can even upload videos or pictures to that. And it's hard to deal with bullying. I've seen it done in the schools and in my own kids, and just wanted to remind everyone to not let anybody define your own worth. That's only a reflection of their own insecurities, and to encourage any student going through it to talk to an adult and to don't keep that inside. There could be a lot. Does anybody else have any other safety messages to share? Okay. Thank you. Motion to adopt the March 1st, 2021 agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Lisa, second by Dale. All in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Passes 3-1. Staffing update, Mr. Garner.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to bring this up now because we're in the midst of staffing, just starting the processes. We collected the numbers and projections for next year. You'd be happy to know that our numbers in school look pretty good right now based on the projections we have. I wanted to kind of give you a couple of heads up. We're using the district TPR for staffing to give it a local budget cost. From there, what we'll do is possibly use ESSER money if we need to allow for additional assistants or teachers to make the spaces smaller. We don't know where where it's gonna be in terms of the start of next year, so that's what we're planning to do right now. It is important. We did push our dates back because of COVID, and so the staffing plan normally would go to you this month and give us a lot more time to work through some of the changes in scheduling. But this year it's going on April 13th. So I'm bringing it to your attention because if you have any questions about staffing or concerns, we'll try to front load you as much as possible, but we really would need that staffing plan approved that night, essentially. So if there's any questions you might have, just encourage other board members to bring those to me as well.
April 13th board meeting.
Yeah. So, sure.
Yeah.
So with the possibility of using those ESSER funds to hire additional teachers to keep the class sizes down, and maybe this has already been reviewed, so I apologize if it's a question that's already been asked, but do you have space available with the number of projected students that might still be at a rise to be able to hire teachers and to be able to have that classroom space to teach in if you have a different teacher and you're gonna need an extra room, are there other rooms available for, let's say, for example, the high schools to be able to accommodate that plan?
Yeah, so the footprint allows us, the high schools, the size of the high schools allow us to do that to an extent. But in talking with both the principals, it would be challenging. There's no way we could do 20-1 at the high schools. We couldn't afford it either. It wouldn't be fiscally responsible. So ultimately, what you'll hear me say when I present the staffing plan is, this is what we did based on TPR. We'll do our best to follow all the protocols in space, but there will be chances. The chances are we won't be able to do that in every classroom. So I just need you to have that heads up right now that that's what we're looking at.
Okay.
So,
All right, thank you.
Sure.
When do you plan to have when is the survey due for parents about next year's plans? That's maybe an Allison question.
It ends today.
Okay.
So we.
And that's what will further build your staffing plan, right, Scott?
It'll help us get an idea of who may be left out there that we still need to collect, if that makes sense, or find out where they're at. But for our plan, we have to go based on what we have in Infinite Campus for enrollment. And so
Okay.
what I've asked the schools to do is if there's, say, for example, one particular school has 10 kids that they don't really know, they haven't responded, the parents haven't responded back, we've tried to reach out. If we don't know where they're at, we're planning for them to be in face-to-face. That allows us that flexibility. It gives us a staffing that, in fact, if they do show up, then great. If they don't, then that gives us more space in the classroom, if that makes sense.
But we didn't have to put our name on that survey, though.
This particular survey
Oh.
is not really,
You
so,
mean registration?
yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. When is registration again?
Oh, boy.
Well, I'll get it.
Good
Later?
question.
Yeah, typically it starts in July is
Okay.
when we first open
Okay.
Infinite Campus for parents
Okay.
register. We've talked about moving it up a little
Yeah.
bit to gather that information earlier, like earlier in June, but that's something that we're in discussion
Okay.
about.
Okay, that makes sense. Sorry, I confused the two. I brought them both. Okay.
Yeah,
Bill,
so.
do you have anything? Oh, sorry, Scott.
I just wanted to just touch on that, we still probably will have some staff moving based on, or shifting, I should say, based on where kids land. I mean, that's gonna happen more. I would guess it happened a lot this year, but it'll still happen next year because we won't be over this just yet, so.
So at this point, it's looking like we'll be status quo with resignations, blah, blah, blah. And we're really not anticipating any layoffs.
That I can't, I don't wanna say that's a done deal. I can't anticipate, we'll have to look at where the numbers are ahead of time. So I would hesitate to say that no layoffs, because that could happen still, based on our numbers and where things land. Okay?
I do like the fact that you're planning and maybe having the possibility and researching opening up registration in June. That just might create a little bit more space to make some informed decisions. So even though parents are like, oh, yay, school's done, don't have to think about it. I would strongly encourage that, just so it gives you more time and adequate planning and instructional delivery. So thank you for doing.
Yeah, thanks for putting this on the agenda. Again, I just didn't want it to go off the radar and then all of a sudden show up in April and say, hey, here we are. So there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes.
Yeah, right.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, standards-based grading update by Mrs. DeGraff.
Thank you. Yes, and I have Patty Hernandez here. Yes, Dr. Hernandez. Congratulations again to Patty. So yes, she's here tonight as well to join me for the presentation, and she's done a lot of work specifically with some of our CT&E and elective courses as well. So she'll bring that perspective to the conversation today. So standards-based grading, this has been a process over the last several years that we've been working on with both Craig and Parker High School. We've had a few challenges in that process because it's important to have, all of the teachers and at the table. And so without having to have a sub, you really have to do that during our professional development days. Well, last year, many of those days were taken at the end of the year with COVID, and the year before that, we lost 3 or 4 due to the polar vortex. And then this year, they were taken up sometimes with transition or pivots. So it's been a challenge, but we've continued to move forward, maybe just not at the rate that we had hoped for. So what is the process that we have been following? Do I have to... There we go.
The seventh time is the charm. Yeah.
So yes, where are we currently in the process? And where do we want to end, at least this year? What's our goal and into the fall? So our first step in the process is what we want a standard, our standards aligned curriculum. That's our vision. And our board adopts the Wisconsin state standards. And so each course and content area looks at our state standards, and we have to identify what are the priorities in their standards. There's many pages of standards. And also many of the standards are put into bands, so it might be a 9-12 band, and we have to determine which standards fall in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. So that's all part of the process as well. So we find out, we look at those standards and we prioritize what are the most important standards. And then we have opportunities in identifying those priority standards to have, what we call those vertical alignment conversations, where the 9th and 10th grade teachers are talking and 10th and 11th to say, if this is what we're teaching in 9th, then here's the next progression of this standard in 10th. We also just want to make sure that we're not teaching the same thing, that, we are continuing to help students progress in their learning. So the first year or two, we spent prioritizing those standards and identifying what are the key standards in each of our courses that are going to be consistent, whether you're at Craig or Parker. We want the same outcome for all students. Then we have to take a look at all of those standards next and determine, again, what's that vertical alignment and what are those supporting standards? So priority standards are the most important standards that we're really going to emphasize in the course. The supporting standards we teach, but they maybe don't have as much emphasis because they may not, when we're looking at the state standards, when we're looking at the ACT standards, we're determining which ones are going to be most important and need the most emphasis, and then which ones are going to support those bigger standards. From there, we move into what we call benchmarking. And so these are all the standards we're going to teach in English 9, but what standards are we teaching first quarter, second quarter, third quarter? So benchmarking it and pacing it throughout the year, as well as then taking it and what are those key learning objectives from our standards. Then the next step, and that's currently where we're at right now, is success criteria. So we're getting to the end of this process. And success criteria is looking at the standards that we identified and determining what is the evidence the students need to show us that they have proficiency in this standard. So we're looking at what are students doing or demonstrating or showing us on an assessment that indicates they understand the standard. And then the last part is we know the priority standards, and that is our goal and what we want to have complete by next year, is that specifically our core courses, and we're working towards that in all of our electives, is we want to have common assessments. So each course is developing assessments. Now, some of those courses, it's going to take less time because we adopted a new high school English resource. And so the assessments within that resource we know are aligned to our state standards. So we're really just confirming in that assessment that it aligns to what we prioritized as standards. And if it doesn't, then we may need to add a question or a task to that. In courses where we maybe haven't had an adoption in 10 years, what has happened is you may have two courses, like an example of an elective, an intro to vet science. And because we haven't had a new resource, or there's been multiple different teachers over the years teaching it, different assessments have been developed along the way. And so we need to make sure that there's consistency, because sometimes not the same thing is not being assessed consistently in all courses. And that is our goal, to have that consistency and alignment to the standards in our assessments. And so it's really a process, it's a cycle where we're identifying the standards, the objectives, identifying success criteria, and developing new assessments. And, as we know what the target is for students, then we know more specifically what we're grading the students on, and the students have a better understanding of what they're learning. So these are some of the complicated documents. So this, for example, is one of our priority standards documents that shows vertical alignment for high school English. So in all English courses, one of the standards is citing evidence from the text. And so, and identifying the central idea. And so what we have to do is, what does that standard look like in 9th grade English, in 10th grade English? And you can't see very well on this slide, but in blue, we have highlighted what changes in the standard as they progress each year. So it may be the same standard, but how does it get more complex? And so the teachers identify what changes each year in that standard as it gets more challenging for students, as well as the text that they read becomes more challenging. Then as well, when we look at English 9, 10, and 11, again, one of the state standards is, that students are able to use a variety of vocabulary strategies. But for example, in 9th and 10th grade, that has to be explicitly taught. But by 11th and 12th grade, we would expect that that's more of an independent skill. So it's not a priority there. It's more of a supporting, as ensuring that you're revisiting it, but not putting as much emphasis on it because there's mastery expected. So these are kind of the complex standards documents that we're building with our teams. And so I'm going to go ahead and have Patty share as well, for example, what that may look like. There we go.
So for me, I'd like you to just kind of think about maybe your own educational experience, or think of this story here. You have a 10th grader who is maybe in Intro to Vet Science and went to practice after school and realizes that tomorrow there's an exam on Chapter 5. And so typically prior to standards-based grading, a student would take home textbook, Chapter 5, and where do you start? Do I have to reread it? Am I going to answer the questions at the end of the text? How am I going to know what is really on the assessment besides it's on Chapter 5? And so what standards-based grading does is it really narrows the focus for a student, and it allows the student to go home and say, you know what, I need to know body systems. I need to know that there's 9 body systems, and I need to know the organs that are in each system. And not only what the name is, but then where are they located within that system. And so as you look at my example here, I'm giving you 2 standards that are found in the Introduction to Vet Science. And so you're seeing AS2 as well as AS3. And then under each one of them, you're seeing the learning objectives that our instructors have identified as their priority standards, and then the learning objectives. So what's interesting about this is each teacher has set out to identify, 8 to 10 roughly priority standards, per course for the most part. And then from there, they identified their learning targets or objectives. And you can see here that there's more objectives than there are standards, and that's typical. And so for a teacher then and for a student to be able to know, and the reference I gave was number 3, list the major body systems found in vertebrate animals, state their function, and identify the organs involved. And so when a student goes home, they know that they need to identify the major systems. They know that they need to state their function, but then also be able to identify the organs involved. And that could be through pictures. That could be through a case study. It could be through some type of like a matching exercise. It could be through a project. An instructor could say, hey, this is your project that I need you to do. And so there's just different ways then that a student could show that they have mastered this content versus going home saying, oh my gosh, Chapter 5 is 43 pages long. Where do I spend my time? And what do I really need to know in order to do well on this assessment? Can hit the next one. So I also wanted to give you maybe some other examples, just thinking of different strengths and things like that. So you can see here my first example for you. You have a learning objective dealing with graphing and helping a student in math class. We've been in math with the slope and the X and the Y, and for some of you, it's great fun, and for others, maybe not so much. So, but looking here then, the teacher then says, hey, you're going to graph ordered pairs to help predict and compare data. But then from there, the instructor is also giving the students, what do they need to actually be able to do? And so the learning objective is even broken down all the further into success criteria. And so it is very normal to have multiple success criteria per objective. So in the first example I gave you, you have one standard with multiple learning objectives, and now you have one learning objective with multiple success criteria. And that really is the norm when you're thinking about what is this going to look like for a student. So a student then should be able to go home and instead of referencing all of Chapter 5, maybe I only need a section of Chapter 5. Or maybe I need a section of chapter 5 and a section of chapter 6. And they can tell me exactly then what section do I really have to spend my time on, because they're getting more specific data when you're looking at that. And you'll also notice when it comes to the success criteria that it's really all about demonstration. Our students should be able to demonstrate that they can actually show that they have met the learning objective standard. And so I want you to also realize that some of our disciplines, their standards were over 100 standards in the discipline. And so when you think about prior to standards-based grading, when I first became a teacher, I was either given, this is what you're going to teach, and it might have had a resource like a text, and it might not have. But they might have said, hey, here's the concepts that you need to teach. And so now, by having standards-based grading, not only do we have concepts, and we have sometimes a text and things like that, but we also have very specific standards that we need to be able to make sure that our students are proficient in. And so in some of our coursework, like I referenced, there's over 100 standards. That's going to be massive and overwhelming for any student to really grasp that I need to get all 100 of these. So for our teachers to then take those standards and say, these are the priority for this course. I'm going to really focus in on these priority statements here, and then these are my supporting. And the rest, it's okay, right? Because priority is really the priority. And so with that, as you can see there, Allison, if you want to hit the next one. So really taking a look at just the backwards design, starting with the end in mind. So starting with the standards and really focusing in on what do we want our students to learn? What's the knowledge? What's the skills that they have to show that they can do? And then how? How are they going to go about learning it? How are we going to teach it? What do they have to do to actually show us that they have mastered that learning objective, as well as the performance indicator? And then finally, what are the most effective ways? And that comes into the instruction of it. So as an instructor, then what are those instructional strategies that are really going to drive home and help a student to most effectively learn? And not only learn for memorization, but actually learn the content to be able to move forward to the next course. And then finally, just it all comes full circle. And so if you just take a look at our next steps, like Allison referenced earlier, she said that we're really on success criteria. And I just want to tell you, most of us are on success criteria. We do have some courses that they're still identifying. Maybe their priority standards, they want to refine them again. They want to go back and look at them. And some of that is due to we have new staff members. So when you have a new staff member, sometimes you have a different voice. And so, there's just been a wide variety. But our goal, like she had mentioned, is that we're headed into assessments and taking a look at their assessments and aligning the assessment to the priority standards. So there's a lot of work to do. I think, though, she's right. We're just moving forward.
So in the example that I'm thinking of my own son, and he probably would go back to chapter 5 and go, oh my gosh, I'm 15 years old, I'm a sophomore, I'll probably read all 43 pages or skim it, but not really knowing what he needs to get out of that. So in that example, you said I'm referencing back, that chapter 5, when that assessment comes, how is the student knowing, is he being told by the teacher, at the beginning of that chapter, like, here are the learning objectives? Are you being transparent with the student saying, here are the learning objectives and here are the success criteria that you will need to know by the end of this chapter, so they can actually, I'm a visual person,
right.
So I'm thinking, if I had this down, if I was in government and I knew that at the beginning of this chapter, I had to name the 3 branches of government, I had to describe the primary function of each branch of government, compare and contrast their functions. If I had this at the beginning of that unit, that would really help me focus, and not to say prioritize, what I really needed to learn out of that chapter. Is that going to be communicated to the students?
Yes, that's the whole goal of this, is that, and I even had when I was working with one of our music teachers, like an aha moment too, as we were working through this process. She said, so what I see now is, before I've been teaching, this is the music that, this is the piece of music I need to teach you in order for the outcome is our concert at the end of the year. But now that I know our priority standards and our success criteria on that sheet of music, I'm going to put those at the top of it for the student to see. So when I'm teaching you this piece of music, this is what I expect you to know once this piece is done.
I just think sometimes, as a past teacher too, you were just teaching and you were just hoping the kids would understand what you were trying to do. But if even third graders, like, I need to know what an ordered pair is. Like, okay, well, I should pay attention because it's on the board every math class. This is what what I'm really trying to focus on, because at the end of the day, that's what I'm going to be assessed on based on this success criteria. So like I said, I'm just a visual person. I just wanted to make sure that that's communicated with the students, because I think you'll find great success if you can have that laser focused criteria for the students so that they know where that end is before the beginning starts.
Right, and that's what they're specifically graded on, not just worksheet 1. It's like this is what we expect you to know. And I think it as Patty was mentioning, chapter 5, well, that's, we talk about depth and breadth. We can't expect you to know everything on these 50 pages. So what is the depth? You're going to have much more, you're going to retain a lot more information if you know what your specific focus is, rather than I'm reading all of this and I'm not sure which part I'm supposed to remember. So.
Yeah, good question. And tangibly, also, it's on at Parker. It's on some of the boards at the front of the classroom. They'll put it, and then also on Google Classrooms. A lot of the documents will have it for the students too. So, good question. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate your time coming in. All right. Our last one in 1.6 is Neola. And we had, 53, 52? That was a lot. That was a lot.
I had
So,
to take breaks as I was
yeah. Yeah. So, no, it was good reading Saturday morning. So, there was a lot of them about defining the roles of the board, different administrators, how to fill vacancies, some of the minutes, the parameters around the minutes, conduct. Early college credit program had a couple of them in there. So I know I only caught one typo in all of them, and which was actually towards the end. I was surprised that, after reading them all. So is any questions on any of them, or did you guys send them to Denise ahead of time, or did you find anything or have any concerns?
We're good. So good for you.
Just in a title of one of them, but they should be fixed right away. And so these will go into the consent agenda for March 9th. And we'll get going on those. So I didn't have any. Dale?
All right, so where are we in the process now of this, for lack of a better word, regurgitation?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Dale. Thank you for asking that. So up to now, what we had been doing at a very slow pace, really, frankly, because of COVID, and the leadership team being having to prioritize that daily operation of the organization, is Neola has these are all the bylaws, actually, is what you have in front of you right now, and then there are 11 sections. So it's the 100s, the 200s, the 300s, and on through, right? So there's finance, there's teaching and learning related stuff. There's all the different policies. And what we had been doing is cherry picking individual policies out of all of those different sections that are kind of the ones that are most commonly referred to and used and occur and reoccur oftentimes in the daily operation of the organization. And so we have a smattering of policies from across sections done, but this is the first time we finally have said, we're going to bring a whole section to you. And so we're kind of shifting now, instead of bringing, just a handful here and there that are kind of all scattered and spread out across those different areas, to bringing whole sections to you at a time. And so different people have to work on different sections depending on what the policy is involving. And so there's another section right now that Denise and I and Scott Brown, our Neola rep, are working on and prepping to bring to you hopefully in April in its totality again, and then we'll move on to other sections from there. I'm not sure we're going to be able to keep up with a section a month, because some of these sections get really detailed and really involved and involve a lot of prep work by a lot of people. And so we're going to really try to move this project process along a bit, and we hope to be completed with it. I'm trying to give myself a little wiggle room, and so my deadline's kind of the end of the 21-22 school year, and Denise is like, oh, we'll have this done in a year from now. So she's ambitious, and so I credit her for that. So that's kind of a shift in the process everything else, the approval process, everything else is the same as it was before.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I know it's a lot of work to have to do all these and update them. All right, moving on to announcements. Sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry, thank you. Would entertain a motion to move these to the full board for adoption. Thank you. Moved by Dale, second by Lisa. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 3-0. Thanks. Sorry, Denise. Announcements, I don't have any. We meet, is it tomorrow, for planning for April's meeting. I was thinking, since we were talking about the evaluation and adding in more of the timing in the self-eval or the self-assessment and that survey, we'll add that in there. Work on that maybe for April. But if you have any other topics that you want in April, it'll be Dale's last meeting with us. We should, no?
I have no topics.
Oh, I was like, what are you saying? Yeah, right. If you think of anything you want covered, I guess let me know by tomorrow, because we're going to work on it. All right, and then our next meeting, I think, I was just kind of looking at that, maybe the Monday after Easter, April 5th at 4:30. We're good, Denise? Could put that as a placeholder, and if we have to move it or something comes up. April 5th look good for you, Lisa? Yep. Okay. We'll shoot for that. At 4:30. We'll be all stuffed with ham and all kinds of good food, so we'll be good.
We'll just roll right in.
We're just gonna roll on in. Yeah, chocolate and ham. We're gonna be stuffed with. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you.